Here we are. Let's hope this is coming through okay. Welcome to another episode of Core Issues. As you can see right here, as you're looking, this is the Core Ministries webpage. This is where Core Issues blog. You can find the blog, the podcast, and everything about Core Ministries, all the different things that we do. Here on this page, you can find all kinds of information here on abortion, abolitionism, and all kinds of other things. Highly recommend you check that out if you are interested in any of the things going on with this. Feel free to give it a look. And then also, and I don't have every episode up to date. I think I'm up to 13 here, and this is episode 17. I think I have a couple of fast takes I don't even have numbered in there. But I do have lots of them on there. I do try to keep them updated. And the other place you're going to want to see, especially if you like to listen to your podcasts more than watch them, here on the Core Issues podcast on Anchor FM, provided by Spotify. If you like to listen to your podcast, now I will tell you, if you listen to this, you're going to miss out on a lot of the visual, because I do a lot of visual stuff here, so you can see proof of things I'm talking about, so you'll miss those by doing it audio. But if you trust me that I'm not lying to you, you'll still hear the information. But the best way is, of course, to go and watch it live on Facebook Live and or on YouTube. I do try to stream on YouTube as well. I've got quite a few, not all, but a few episodes on there. And I believe right now we are even streaming live to Twitch at the same time. I've never done that before. I accidentally actually hit it. So if some streamers may be watching this on Twitch. I know it's mostly a gaming thing, but I am set up for it. So it's streaming on 3 places right now. Pretty crazy. So anyway, places you can listen to the Core Issues podcast provided by Anchor FM, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, of course, and through an RSS feed. So just about any way possible on your most popular feeds, you can listen to Core Issues podcast, or just get it directly from Anchor FM. Big thanks again to Anchor FM for their hosting this absolutely free. I'm up to episode 13 there as well. I will be adding more episodes there soon. And again, those are the audio podcasts. So if you want to see video, your best bet is to go to Facebook Live and catch it on Facebook, where we will be showing it just like this, where you get to see my pretty face talking about everything that we're going to talk about. I want to talk about, obviously, as you can tell by the title, supply and demand sin, child sacrifice for vaccines, and more. I'm going to deal with that. It's a serious issue, and a lot of people, I don't think, understand the depths of the problem with child sacrifice attached to supply and demand, and how our participation in the industries that are profiting from it are helping to keep it active. Now, don't get me wrong, it would go on regardless, but we help promote something when we help feed the supply and demand chain, as it were. And I want to talk to how that is going on right now and show the sick products and the sick practices that are taking place attached directly to abortion, attached to vaccines, and all types of other things that we are caught up in. So we're going to cover a lot of stuff here today. Going to see a lot of ugly stuff, going to hear a lot of ugly stuff, but it's important stuff. But before I even do that, I wanted to show you something here, and I do believe I have it up there. Well, I did have it up there. Where is it? There it is. Before we even get in, let's supply and demand. That's simple enough. I mean, everybody understands it. Let's show a quick picture there. When you demand something, and we demand lots of things as greedy, selfish Americans, that's for sure, but the whole world does. We're very self-driven, of course. Our flesh, Christians, we're the only ones that are actually battling the flesh by the power of the Spirit. But we want stuff for us. We're very self-focused, very self-centered. And when we want things, we demand things. We demand protection. We demand warp speed vaccines. We demand better food products, better medical products, all types of things. Big pharma, big industry is happy to try to meet that demand, as long as we will supply them with enough money, and they will provide a supply of the product that we demand. Very simple. Supply and demand, you would reach equilibrium when you have just the right amount of supply for just the right amount of demand. And the way you make more money, of course, the way you do better is to demand, get the demand up. And of course, we're seeing that massively under the COVID-19 vaccine nonsense, where the supply is massive and the demand is massive because it's being forced. That wickedness is going on regularly. So we see that here, supply and demand. But let's get into the real wickedness behind this. I'm going to cover my ugly mug here, actually. And if you've never seen this video before, it's just a couple minutes long. You should see it. It is a cartoon, but it is a cartoon about the reality of what abortion is. And it's put together by Laura Clausen and Choice42. And if you've never seen this, I really pray that you watch this with me, and I hope it impacts you deeply. So let's watch that together. I'm going to cover this up. Let's go to
the physical anthropology, the bones of...
Of course it does this. I don't even know why I try. Every time I try to go to YouTube and try to do these things, I end up I don't know what it does. It goes off and goes to some other video. I mean, I'm sitting there, leaving it there, and I open it up on here, and it's at some completely different video. So sorry for that. I have no idea why it does that. But this is what we're going to watch. Child Sacrifice, Choice42. And this is gut-wrenching, but I pray that you'll follow along with me and see this short 2.5-minute video, and I hope it impacts you deeply as it does me.
Child sacrifice. Barbaric. Evil. Ancient. Modern. There's nothing new under the sun. Throughout history, children have been sacrificed to a variety of deities in attempts to gain favor or blessings. Aztecs cut their children's hearts out to appease the gods of rain and war. Incas sacrificed their children to the sun god so their crops would flourish. Canaanites sacrificed their infants to Moloch for prosperity. Drums were played loudly to drown out the baby's screams. Child sacrifice never stopped, and we still don't hear their screams. There's nothing new under the sun. We sacrifice our children today, not for rain or war victories, but for freedom or convenience. We sacrifice to gain favor in the workplace, or for the blessings of money or fame. We sacrifice our babies on the altar of free sex. Child sacrifice is no longer a public event. It's done behind closed doors. Rather than a gory burning or bloody stabbing, it's become a neat, sterile, and clinical event. We don't throw our children into the fire or leave them to freeze to death. We starve our babies. We poison them. We rip off their arms and legs and crush their skulls. We call it choice. We call it empowerment. And our culture condones it. We celebrate it. We celebrate baby murder. We consider it vital to our existence. It's become a right. But nothing is different. There's nothing new under the sun. Innocent human beings are still being sacrificed for the selfish gains of those more powerful. Modern child sacrifice is thriving. We must end it. End abortion. Child
Well, my friends, I couldn't be more poignant than that video. It brought tears to my eyes again watching. I just watched it a little while ago, crying over the wickedness that we take part in as a nation. We demand so much, and like that video talks about, and there's nothing new under the sun. We are a wicked, selfish people, and this has become so prevalent in our country, tied to abortion and what we want and the things we want to do. And there's been recent talk about how the abortion holocaust has been affecting science. People aren't even recognizing how wicked the practices are, how deep. I mean, it's horrendously sad that murdering babies in and of itself in a mother's womb isn't bad enough to awaken the conscience of America and especially Christians. And we play footsie with it. We play light with it. We try to put a Band-Aid, as it were, on a knife wound. We try to heal the wounds lightly, as the scriptures would say, and it's wicked. We've not done nearly enough. This is our Holocaust, and what I don't think people understand is this COVID-19 vaccine, how it's attached to it greatly, not just because, oh, there's fetal cell lines, some really old abortions took place. I want to talk about how a history and a culture of that has brought such bloodshed and such blood guilt on our nation. And so many of us, even big-name Christians, who are speaking out against COVID-19 stuff and masks and mandates and vaccine stuff, aren't really connecting the dots to the abortion issue like they should be. They'll talk about it. They'll even say it's a bad thing, but I think even some of the biggest names out there aren't recognizing the depths and the foundational issues of abortion tied to the vaccines and so many other things we're using big pharma, big industry. And so I want to encourage you as we see this to see just how depraved and how wicked we've become as we go over some of these things. And search your heart. Seek to join me, join abolitionists in repentance, join us as abolitionists, and seek to bring an end to this, or at the very least, have no part, wash our hands of it as far as our complicity in it, as we all probably have been or possibly still are in the things that we've done and are doing. So let's dig into this. I want to go to this article next. Scientific American, truth about fetal tissue research. And the reason I want to deal with this is because this is an article from back in 2015, and it details a lot of information about what was being done, fetal research, fetal tissue research, and obviously long before COVID-19, but to say it isn't a new thing. Vaccines and other things, and other research, murdering babies for this research has been done for a long time. And now, and I'm going to go to the next article after this, but to show you why the brakes have come off completely where we're at. But look at this. Back in 2015 article, using fetal tissue is not an easy choice, but so far there's no better choice, says Sue, who has tried and failed to make a humanized mouse with other techniques. Many biomedical researchers depend on fetal tissue to research to really save human lives. In other words, disconnecting fetal from human, saying, oh, fetal research, we're using fetal research as if fetal research is not human baby research. It is shifting of terms to try to moralize a wicked practice. Talking about explosive research, things different, like Planned Parenthood, money they got. I want to go down to this was back, probably, I believe this is the first David Daly, Center for Medical Progress. Remember, they were first showing off the videos of the undercover abortion stings, the Planned Parenthood, things like that. Let's just get, this is the chart I wanted you to see, and I've shown this in other videos, but I'll just show you the chart in the middle of the article. Look at what fetal tissue research by discipline back in 2014 that fetal research was being given to. HIV/AIDS research. Murder our babies to help research for a disease largely brought on through wicked, unrepentant sin. Not all, but the mass majority of it through homosexual sinful activity, and lots of also heterosexual sinful activity. But by and large, that's it. And so what's the biggest thing they're using this for? Murdering babies to research HIV and AIDS. And then just loose developmental biology, eye development and disease, other infectious disease, hep C, diabetes, miscellaneous things like that, in utero diseases, toxic exposure to congenital conditions, and a fetal tissue repository. In other words, just saving it up for later use. Shows all the projects funded, how much money our tax dollars were spent on these things. But listen, just some of the things, just listen to this comment from this guy. I wanted to read some of the comments here. I get very frustrated when misinformed people go on about how it can all be done with computer models or cell cultures or stem cells or animals, says Paul Fowler, a reproductive biologist, University of Aberdeen in the UK. Get down liver development. In some areas, a human is absolutely dramatically different than rodents. Well, no duh, obviously, and murdering them for research is wicked. Talking about cell lines derived from fetal tissues have been fairly commonplace in research in medicine since the creation in the 1960s of the WI38 cell strain, which was derived at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Merck 5, Medical Research Council. Viruses multiply readily in these cells, and they're used to manufacture many globally important vaccines. So see, back from the 60s, this has been big. And so that work is continuing today. Important. Let's see. I know they talk down here. They're going to get into talking. You heard about the humanized mouse up there. I'm going to talk about this here. Let's see. Well, they're talking about HIV and AIDS and the use that's being done for those. Look at this. This is talking about mice. Prominent among those is the BLT bone liver thymus mouse, which was created in 2006. This model is made by destroying the animal's immune system and then surgically transplanting liver and thymus tissue fragments from a human fetus into the mouse. The immune system is further humanized with a bone marrow transplant using blood-forming stem cells from the same fetal liver. The animal enables studies, for instance, of immune response that are key to developing an effective HIV vaccine. The mouse has accelerated the study of HIV pathogenesis and novel approaches to harness antiviral immunity to control HIV. So, when you hear someone talking about mice in like lab rats, mice in experimentation, know that quite possibly they are talking about mice that have been infused with bone marrow from murdered image bearers of God, as well as their organs from usually second trimester abortions. Second trimester murders of preborn image bearers are being grafted into mice so that they can be experimented on. This is going back all the way to about 2006. It's been going full force. I've done several other shows talking about it, even during the Trump administration, these things taking place. But it's going to explode now. It already has. The floodgates have been opened under Biden, and I will show that again here. But listen to this fateful and sickening truth from somebody speaking here, quoted. Human fetal tissue is likely never going to be replaced in some areas of research, particularly research relative to fetal development, says Wolynitz. Human fetal research will probably never going to be replaced by certain things. All kinds of things, because they see such value in the study of disease and many different things done because of the murder image bearers of God provide such good resources for their work. Listen down here, Mr. Goldstein, speaking to Nature magazine, says, someone has to speak up responsibly. He stressed that he and his colleagues think hard about ethics of their work. We are not happy about how the material became available, but we would not be willing to see it wasted and just thrown away. Oh, the wickedness of this. Uncomfortable viewing. Listen to this. This is everybody knows about the Planned Parenthood exposed videos. Deborah Nicole, the group's senior director of Planned Parenthood Medical Service, describes how she crushes fetuses above and below key organs to preserve them intact for research. She also described turning a fetus into a breech position to deliver the head last when the cervix is more dilated, thus preserving the brain. This raised the question of whether physicians are altering abortion techniques to accommodate research requests, violating a widely held precept of research ethics. Widely held research ethics. It's okay to murder the baby, but by no means should you do anything to preserve the organs so that you can do experiments on them. Oh, but they are. Oh, but they are. I mean, just listen to the wickedness of that, folks. Listen to how people are arguing. But supply and demand. Supply and demand. Oh, look at this. Contrary absolutely puts fetal tissue research at risk when they talk about this stuff. So I can go through, and we went through most of that, but let me show you this next article. This is a recent article. Biden administration. This is brand new, so you can see that. Now you think, well, under Trump, a lot of that stuff was stopped. Well, under Trump, some of it was stopped to a degree. But Trump is gone, and you're going to see in here how weak his protections were anyway. But this is a brand new article. Just came out this year. Well, not brand new. It came out in April of 2021, but in the middle of the Biden administration. The Biden administration, President Joe Biden, is reversing restrictions imposed by former President Donald Trump on federal funding for medical research using human fetal tissue from elective abortion. Notice that. Notice this key term, my friends. Trump didn't stop fetal tissue research. He just simply put a semi-halt, as you see, not even a full halt, on the federal funding of it. Oh, yeah, it's still available, and if people want to spend their own money and research firms could get it or get grants from other people, just not from the federal government. There's never been a stop to this wickedness. Supply and demand. Supply and demand of sin. Because there's so much good that can be done from murdering babies and then researching them. Oh, I'm relieved, says Altacaro, professor of law and bioethics at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I would call it a very welcome return to socially responsible approach to the use of fetal tissue in research, to the use of murdered babies in research. There we go. Let's use it what it should be said. But listen to Trump's policy. I know a lot of big pro-Trumpers probably listen or see this show, but I mean, listen to how protective his policy was. And listen when it was enacted. He's this 2 years, his policy is near the end of his presidency. The Trump administration policy announced in June of 2019 prohibited NIH's in-house scientists from conducting research using human fetal cell tissue, which would otherwise be discarded by abortion. But listen to this. All these things are being tossed out. But listen to this. He didn't even put a blanket ban. He put a group together. He said there must be a coalition of researchers, doctors, and panelists to determine every request for the use of fetal tissue research and to see whether they would allow it or not. Look at key. They rejected all but one of the 14 funding applications. That's sick. That is just sick. I mean, it wasn't even stopped under the most pro-life president in history. They still funded one of them. Wasn't even a ban on a rule for that. There was still a committee that could approve it, and they did at least one. But now, friends, all the brakes are off. Listen, the fetal tissue remains essential for studying viral infections, HIV, Zika, coronavirus, and other viruses. The International Society for Stem Cell Research wrote in a statement released today, which applauds the policy reversal as a return to evidence-based policymaking. All the brakes are off, folks. The Biden administration, where Trump had some little bits of limiting of money towards it, now all the brakes are off and your money's going full force into it, as well as all the other people that were paying for it with their own money and doing what they wanted to do on their time. All of that is out the door. So I just wanted you to see that this is now part of the current administration. Brakes are off, and I'll show you so much if you were wondering, what is this stuff? What are you talking about here? Let me show you show you a couple pictures real quick here. This is what we're talking about. It's a very basic. This came out of another article, but you can find this on Google. This isn't hard to see. This isn't hard to find. And now, gross, I think, means for the massive pictures. Or whatever it is. That doesn't mean it is gross, but my friends, I think we all agree this is gross. Look at this. We've got here human skin development, human skin appendage hair, human. I don't know what that is there, but lymphoid, thymus and spleen, humanized spleen. These are taken, these organs are pulled out of murdered babies from second trimester murders, we call abortion. And then those are then grafted into mice to study, and you heard me reading about how they're talking about doing it. It's not something I just show you in another article, that they put these in as well as bone marrow transplants into these mice so that they can experiment them as humanized mice, because they are better for us to experiment on because they give a more human response. They give a human response because we're killing humans and using their parts to do it. Now, this one up here, what's the human hair? That's where they're taking murdered baby scalps and they're cutting them off from second trimester murdered babies, and they're sewing them on to mice to see how they respond to treatment and to different effects, different diseases and things through human hair on mice to see how they respond to protect us adults. Friends, this wickedness has gone on a long time. It's not going anywhere. There's just a little picture of it. That's from a Sun Times article, I believe, is where I read one of the articles about this a while ago, and I've done a show on it, told you before. But mouse's immune system destroyed by radiation. They torture the mouse and destroy its immune system, then put the aborted baby's parts into it, and sometimes put hair on it, shave it and put the hair, sew that on, and mouse develops human immune system ready for experimenting. Isn't that nice? Get to use that, get to get that mouse ready for human experimentation. And you may think to yourself, you may be listening to this going, but wow. I mean, it's horrible. And I mean, it makes me sick. But it's not like women are approving of this. It's not like women are saying this is okay. Well, yeah, they are. I mean, not that I hope you're upset enough they're going to murder their babies, but I mean, you're not that upset, but you're like, well, they surely wouldn't approve of using their babies for research. That doesn't happen. I mean, that's not what's going on. I mean, you heard them talk about them going to waste, but surely they wouldn't actually do that, and surely doctors wouldn't try to encourage them and wouldn't try to coerce them in any way to take part in this. Well, again, sadly, you would be wrong. And I was going to show a web page for this, but for some reason that web page, when I pulled it over, had a transparent background, and so you couldn't see it as well. But you'll see the link if you want to check it out yourself. But here it is, from the good old American Medical Association. Look at this, so that you can Google it later and see that I'm not lying, not telling something, I'm not making up web pages for you to see. You can see the web page up there if you want to look at that and write it down. That'd be kind of hard. Your better bet is just to Google. Or use DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you're using. Code of Medical Ethics Opinion 7.3.5. Research using human fetal tissue. Oh, you mean the AMA actually gives guidance on this? Yes, they do. And look at why. Research with human fetal tissue research has led to the development of a number of important research and medical advances, such as the development of polio vaccine. Fetal tissue has also been used to study the mechanism of viral infections and to diagnose viral infections and inherited diseases, as well as to develop transplant therapies for a variety of conditions, for example, Parkinson's. However, the use of fetal tissue for research purposes also raises a number of ethical considerations, including to the degree to which a woman's decision to have an abortion might be influenced by the opportunity to donate fetal tissue. Concerns have also been raised about the potential conflict of interest where there is possible financial benefit to those who are involved in the retrieval, storage, testing, preparation, and delivery of fetal tissues. And if you read my blog at all, you see I listed both of those companies. I think it was the Center of Bioethical Reform, is David Dallin, and we'll get to that in another article here in a minute. But there's no doubt there's two specific research companies out of California who they make their money on buying up fetal remains, murdered baby parts from Planned Parenthood and other places, and then cultivate them, separate them, do what they do so that they can then be bought by research facilities like many of our universities that we're sending our kids to and putting money into, so they can do experimentation on them. And that is happening. So, does the AMA approve of it? Yep, they've even got guidelines how to do it. Now, listen, look at this last line, very important. To protect the interests of pregnant women, as well as the integrity of science physicians who are involved in research that uses fetal tissues, should. That's a key word, should. In other words, they give some ideas. Abstain from offering money or exchange for fetal tissue. Remember, this is should. This isn't must. This isn't law. This is just saying, here's some things you should maybe think about when you're trying to convince women to murder their baby for the sake of the good of humanity. My friends, women will testify that it's good. And some people have argued with me and said, well, that doesn't happen. Doctors surely wouldn't say that. They not only say it, they've got a whole ethics situation. They've got a whole rule written up for it. Don't be deceived, friends. This is right out of the American Medical Association. It's wicked. Straight up wicked. You know, it's really sad. Just look at that real quick, just as a little aside. See that little thing right by the AMA? You know what that is? That's the classic symbol for medical care. That is Moses' staff and the brass serpent. When everyone would look, when God said, look to the serpent, look to this brass serpent, the serpent on the staff, and you'll be healed. The first big medical healing, a miraculous healing by God. And how wicked we have strayed from. Now you'll see the things where they use a Greek god one replacing much, but that's the original. Moses' brass serpent on the staff, that those were to look to for healing from God. Well, now we'll murder image bearers of God to help the healing of the born. How wicked we become, friends. How wicked we become, and it is being done, and it is being promoted. And I tried to find the link, but I could not. I was trying to find the information. I know I heard it. I want to say it's from the Obama era. And I know it's not alone, because you can find, there's all kinds of, all abortion providers try to help women to figure out a way to do funerals and things like that. But I remember one abortionist was claiming to be a Christian and was actually working with women to provide certain burials and everything to assuage their conscience as they murdered their babies and then took care of them with a proper burial. How convoluted and sick is that? Here in Oregon, I didn't look this, I just hit my mind again. I remember this just happened in the state of Oregon where I'm living, where they just passed a new law. It's in Portland, where employers now have to give up to 3 days, I believe it's 3 days of bereavement leave, even for women who choose to have an elective abortion. Isn't that sick? What a total contradiction. That's why we can't really reason with people, because their minds are so corrupted and so foul. They are saying, we understand that it's your right to murder that child in your womb. And we also understand that because that really is a child in your womb, we don't like to talk about it like that, that when you murder them, you might have some bereavement issues. You might feel bad. You might have some pain physically, psychologically, mentally, spiritually. You might have some of that because you murdered one of your own children, and so we're going to actually give you leave paid for that. What a wicked, messed up society we are, my friends. But let's get to this other article that really goes in depth. And this is right now. I mean, this is just put out there, folks. This is like a just done article in this month. So it's very up to date. Good old Pitt, University of Pittsburgh. Let's see what's going on. This is an article from the Federalist. And this is, let's see the date here. Okay, sorry, last month, October 13th, 2021. Here's what we know about Pitt's sadistic experiments on unborn babies. Let's get into the sadistic experiments on unborn babies. It was reported earlier this year that the University of Pittsburgh used taxpayer funds, specifically grants from Dr. Anthony Fauci. Whoa, Anthony Fauci? You mean he's had something to do with abortion? You mean abortion had some influence on Fauci, and Fauci had some influence on using aborted fetal research on anything he's done throughout history, and especially COVID-19 research, been encouraged and put forward by him? You don't think it's had anything? Of course not. Come on, people. Anthony Fauci's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases to run barbaric experiments splicing lab rats. Hey, look at that. With organs harvested from aborted children. In response, pro-life activists and elected officials have called for state and federal investigations into the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, NIAID, and the local Planned Parenthood, which supplies body pieces from aborted babies for experiments. So they had a big panel, talked about a lot of stuff. And the first person they talked to was the Center for Medical Progress founder, David Daleiden, the guy who did all the Planned Parenthood expose things we talked about earlier. Listen to this. Daleiden explained how in grant applications to receive NIH funding, National Institute of Health, which was run most recently by Francis Collins, I believe his name was, professor, claimed to be a professing Christian. I'm not going to say he's not, but he's also believes in evolutionary creation through evolution. He's got some twisted ideas, but he's the guy who split the genome, mapped the genome. Very, very smart guy. I'm not going to say he's not a Christian, but he's been part of a lot of this wickedness because he's been leader of NIH for years. And then now he's finally pulled the pin and retired because I think he finally had enough of his conscience, probably kicked at him too much. But the NIH, National Institute of Health, those are the ones where all the funding grants have gone out over the years to do this type of research, and he was leading that for years and years. Anyway, don't want to get sidetracked too much. They advertise their facilities as the best location for the GoodMap aborted fetal kidney harvesting program. Pitt described how aborted babies are still alive at the time their kidneys are cut out. This was a selling point for why Pitt should receive millions of taxpayer dollars. Now, I couldn't find the article right up, but someone put it out a while ago, and the idea is that most of these abortions are something that maybe people didn't know before. They're advertising. Pitt was advertising it. That the only way to really do good research is to get live organs, is to harvest those organs from living babies. And this could very well be true. In articles I've read, this could very well be true that this was happening even as far back as I believe it was the 70s or 80s when they did the HEC 293 baby murder. They brought about that HEC 293 cell line. And if you remember what HEC means, human embryonic kidney cells. And the best way to do that, and they're even talking about it here, is to make sure you harvest it from living babies. That's the wickedness, friends. It's been going on for a long time. Not only, if it isn't bad enough, it doesn't raise your ire enough, that they're taking parts off of murdered babies, they're taking the parts as the babies are still alive through what many would call late-term abortions, but really, it's just infanticide under a different name. In fact, this is what they say. When they say they track and record the warm ischemia time, that means they know the time at which the fetuses lose their circulation and lose their blood supply, Daladin said, reading from the grant application. They specifically say labor induction, not just a forceps extraction abortion, but a labor induction abortion, where they induce labor and the mom pushes out a baby at 24 weeks. They're keeping the baby alive so they can get better tissue, better organs, living organ tissue, so they can do better research to help us selfish, greedy, born people who either through our apathy and not looking in, not caring, and I was part of that for a long time, and now I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you so you don't have to do the work. You just have to watch a show and look at the research, and you can do more, and I recommend you do, but I can show it to you live here. Hope to prick your conscience that the supply and demand of sin is happening, and we are helping to promote this who are taking part in these vaccines. Not trying to make excuses of whether one or the other is better than the other, or no, it didn't have fetal cell lines. I mean, I've blown this up on all kinds of podcasts, so I don't need to go into that, but I want you to see the supply and demand chain. I want to see this new touch that I haven't talked on before, stuff that I've only just recently been hearing. It makes me even more sick. That we're taking and we're inducing labor of mothers to bring out these babies, and maybe they leave a part in, so it's only that partial birth, so they can legally justify the murder. And he talks about how they may have violated federal state law and federal partial birth abortion law, and how these potential criminal violations should be investigated by lawmakers. A felony prohibition on infanticide, a ban on any consideration whatsoever for fetal tissue, and a specific prohibition of any experimentation on living fetus, whether inside or outside the womb. The federal statute against partial birth abortion applies to delivering the baby alive with the purpose of killing the baby after delivery through organ harvesting or through other means. If they're maintaining blood flow to the kidneys, extracting the baby up to the level of the kidneys and then kill the baby, it's a clear pattern for criminal violation. Now, here's how sick and sad it is, friends. That we're still have laws in the books that are focused on how you murder the baby. Where the baby is when you murder it. That's how wicked we are, friends. That's the blood guilt this nation makes. It isn't just the wickedness of the oppression of the tyrants by forcing these vaccines who are tainted by murdered image bearers of God. It's the supply and demand of sin from a nation who has spent our life selfishly seeking our own good and abandoning the neighbors we're supposed to be loving to death, to murder, letting them stumble to the slaughter and not calling out to them. Proclaiming iniquitous decrees, laws that do not treat them as humans, not promoting equal justice and equal protection. Here, supply and demand, it gets even grosser. Let's get to the next section. Race quotas and race targeting. What? Race targeting for aborted babies? Look at this. Pitt's grant application stated its fetal harvesting program would choose individuals on the basis of sex, gender, race, and ethnicity, setting quotas of 50% white patients and abortive fetuses and 50% minority patients and fetuses, with 25% of those minority fetuses to come from black women. Allen pointed out that in western Pennsylvania, compared to other metropolitan areas like Philadelphia or New York, there are smaller Hispanic and Asian populations, and so the largest majority of population there would be African American. Therefore, Allen said she finds it disingenuous to even suggest that black babies are less than 25% of the 50% minority patients and fetuses. What's really interesting, if you read through this, you'll find out that the woman who is in charge of the University of Pittsburgh putting all this abortion research together is also the leader of the Planned Parenthood in Pennsylvania there. So, I mean, she's like profiting both ends. She's approving everything. She is the supply and the demand. She's working both sides of the coin. It is straight wickedness. But what's really straight wicked is that not only are we just talking about the sale of the parts and how they're killing babies is the illegal thing that we're worried about, and not only whether we can bring criminal charges on that, but how the possibility that none of it may not happen at all. Nothing formative may take place at all. Listen to this Dan Park, I think he was a former retired judge, retired judge Cheryl Allen at today's panel discussion. How can the University of Pittsburgh justify working with Planned Parenthood and the entire abortion industry at any level? They owe their very existence to racism and Margaret Sanger. This judge, obviously a black lady who knows the history, and if it doesn't know the history, even Planned Parenthood now in their hypocrisy is coming out and saying, well, we don't really support Margaret Sanger's infanticide and genocide issues with the black people and other people and people with mental issues and people with basically the racist. She was a white supremacist, racist, wicked woman. And they're saying, well, we don't really like that stuff, but we love abortion. They try to have one of them when she specifically was pushing for abortion to kill off black people. And you still find them in the big cities around the places in low-income districts where women can get easy access to murdering their babies. And let's see what Fauci says about it. Daladin explains how in his initial reporting on publicly available documents, they concluded, okay, let's just say they thought it was $1.4 million. It's actually $3 million gone to $3 million just to Pittsburgh for this. In-house appropriations in May. There we go. Let's get down to where he skewers Fauci. Daladin skewered. Oh, let me get Fauci's response. Let me see what he said. In-house appropriations, getting back to the mice. Here it is, the mice scalps. In-house appropriations hearing in May, Fauci was asked about the NIAID's funding of Pitt experiments getting scalps from 18 to 20-week aborted fetuses onto rats, and if the agency is aware of where the fetuses come from. Fauci replied that the study went through all the appropriate guidelines and oversight. Doesn't even want to answer the question. Well, yeah, we know that it was definitely only through, fetuses or try to dance around babies and fetuses. No. Everything was done by the book. And sadly, it probably was. And will be said to be done so under the Biden administration for sure. Yes, murdered babies, scalping murdered babies and sewing them onto rats. Daladin skewered Fauci's response as outrageous for two reasons. First, intact scalps used, which can be seen in pictures. I showed you some pictures of that type of stuff. Just the after stuff being sewn on. But listen, hear this. Included in the research, included in the study, are only obtainable the size shown through a partial birth abortion, intact heads. Intact heads would not be obtainable through dismemberment abortion where the skull is going to be crushed, Daladin explains. And usually that's what they do. They crush the baby's skull and squeeze out the brain matter and everything, so it's easier to deliver. Poor mother, we don't want her to suffer, like a woman giving birth, but anyway, making them suffer. Let's just make it easier to pull the baby out, crush the head. But they're not doing this. That's why they're doing induction labor abortions, because they want people. They want people to benefit. The supply and demand. We need more vaccines. We need more research. We need more stuff for us. We need that wickedness to continue. So bring out the intact head so we can scalp them more easily. Second, in terms of what oversight is being done, it was recently reported that the vice chair of the University of Pittsburgh Institutional Review Board, here it is, Dr. Beatrice Chen, is also the medical director of Planned Parenthood Western Pennsylvania. Whoa! Works both places. I already talked about that. Anyway, the panel discussion on Tuesday concluded with a call for more disclosure, more investigations, and more pressure on lawmakers and law enforcement to make sure not a single dime, listen to this, not a single dime of federal taxpayer money or Pennsylvania taxpayer money goes to any institution that is promotion of destruction of life, said former U.S. House Representative Keith Rothfuss. My friends, that's the sick and sad reality that we live in today. Again, we are far too concerned with us more than we are with our neighbors. We don't love our neighbors as ourselves, or we wouldn't do this. We don't follow God's like He says, "You shall not murder," and we have no distinct dignity for murdered image bearers of God. If you ever read my blogs, not just watch the podcast, I wrote a blog recently dealing with the dignity of human remains, and how the image that we bear of God is not just spiritual, but is actually also part of our physical being. Did Jesus properly image forth the image of God in his humanity? Yes, Jesus said, "If you've seen me, you've seen the Father." His resurrection showed that he didn't just come back spiritually and leave the dead body. No, his resurrection, as the first fruits of the resurrection, was to bring forth the whole body in resurrection, and we one day will likewise be resurrected. We will one day, whether it be through a rapture or whether it be through whenever Christ comes back to set up his kingdom on earth, and we know that the dead in Christ will rise first, we will meet together and we will be resurrected and we will have physical, eternal bodies. It's part of our image bearers before God. And even, I show through the blog, even secular culture, even godless culture, because of their image bearer of God stamped on them that you can't avoid. It's intrinsic to care for the dead, which is why we bury them, cremate them, do some kind of ceremonies with them, no matter what type of culture, pagan to Christian it may be. There is a honor of the dead. So much so that in our country and in many others, you can get charged criminally for mutilating a corpse, for doing something wicked to it, for having sex with a corpse or some other wickedness people get involved with. We recognize this as wicked because there's a dignity to the human body. Even pagans, even the professed atheists understand this. But we only seem to care about that with the born. And the hypocrisy, even amongst Christians, to make excuses for this, and which I did. Again, I did a podcast talking about the apples and oranges comparisons. But to just throw that out again real quickly, to remember, friends, that tying this to the dignity of remains is that none of this is allowed on the born dead. Oh yeah, if they're dying in an accident, they die from murder, and they had given consent prior for their body to be donated to science or for organ donation, they can do that. But the key there is consent. And the consent always must come from the victim. The only other time you might see consent is when a child dies and a parent gives consent, whether through a miscarriage or through an accident or something like that, and the parent ends up making the call. But again, that is because a tragedy happened. Someone other than them murdered the child or killed them through accident or however it may be, and they gave consent. And again, adults must have a donor card, donor approval before their parts can be used. But only with the preborn will we let the mother, the murderer, choose, often following AMA advice, to murder the baby and use it for scientific research, assuaging the conscience that they're doing good through the evil they're doing. In other words, what Paul would say is wicked. What Paul would say through Romans 3:8 would say to us as Christians who sadly have taken part in this through our voting for iniquitous decrees and our apathy and all of that. When he says it is slanderous and condemnable for people to even speak of Christians of doing this thing, we do it. What is this thing? He says, saying, let us do evil, that good may come of it. Women are saying, yes, I'll murder the baby, that good may come of it. Now, we can say, yes, it was evil that the drunk driver or the killer shot and killed my child, and let some good come of it by their organs being donated and maybe saving several lives. but not by the murderer saying, I'm going to murder this child so that I can assuage my conscience by giving their body to science. That's doing evil, taking part in the evil that good may come. That is slanderous and condemnable, that a Christian should ever be accused of that, and yet even Christians fall for that stupidity and that wickedness in our supporting wicked, iniquitous decrees and pro-life compromise bills that I was part of for many years, and many still are. Even some of the greatest minds and the greatest preachers that I know are still stuck up in this, and it's sad. But we need to stop. We need to repent of it. We need to recognize that our continuing, we just have to remember this, friends, as we continue to allow abortions to take place without our voice being heard, without our stances being made, that we're contributing to it. We're helping the supply and demand chain because we're not out there being a witness, being a voice, being an advocate for our preborn image bearers being slaughtered, being murdered in the womb by their mothers, approved of, encouraged by their fathers, often grandmothers and grandfathers, aunts and uncles, friends. All the wickedness compiling on in a culture that says you are far more important. Sacrifice your child, not just for your good, but for the good of humanity. I don't know that there's a realm in ethics that addresses this issue, but it definitely ties to the supply and demand sin issue, and is this. We often are every day making research gains, abounding in knowledge and wisdom, as the scripture says in the last days, knowledge and wisdom will abound, knowledge will go off the charts. But we are going into places that we can without determining whether we should. I don't know what the term may be, but I've heard it discussed in the realm of ethics, whatever it may be. But just because we can do a thing doesn't mean we should. And we are reaching technical advances, technological leaps and bounds that are allowing us to do things that God would have us never do. And it's hard to walk that line. It's hard to walk that line. Now, obviously, there can be people doing a podcast just like this, using technology like I'm using, like this, and using it for the promotion of wickedness and evil. And we can use many of these things neutrally for the promotion of good and righteousness also. That's our hope to do. But some things we advance so far that they are wicked in and of themselves. And we have to be careful of that. And at the very least, even if you think maybe there's something we've done that isn't wicked in and of itself, we can definitely know that the primary focus of them can be wickedness and sinful. And we as Christians have to be very careful of this. And as I've said earlier on here, and I'll say again now, and I've said many times before, we should all be trying to get out of the big pharma industry because of how much this murdered baby research is attached to all of it. As you've heard in articles I've read today and seen in things that I hope your conscience has been pricked about the wickedness of child sacrifice and how in depth and how ingrained it is into our culture, and how under the Biden administration now it's even going to be going full force forward more, even with more of your tax dollars, even more unrestrained. It's time for us to rise up, friends. Long past time for us to rise up. It means we're going to be voices far more locally, really focusing in on our city councils and our counties, commissioners and things like that. We're going to need to be a voice here, not just for the craziness that is happening, but know that those things, the COVID-19 vaccine mandates, mask mandates and all that, those are not root issues. Those are fruit issues of a wicked nation has turned its back on God, and the vaccines are directly connected to the abortion tree. When they talk about legal terms, it's a correlation that these babies, because these cell lines were used, the HEC-293 and the, I believe it's Merck 5 used for Johnson & Johnson, but HEC-293 for testing both in Pfizer and Moderna, you cannot separate. We would not have these vaccines were they not done, not made, having used testing and development with the HEC-293 cell lines, human embryonic kidney cell lines, from a baby that quite possibly was harvested their kidney while they were alive. I don't know. But according to that article, nothing being hidden by Pitt, of course, they're doing that now. And if they've said it, how many others? Of course they're doing it. It's a standard practice. Because we want our health. We want the best for, quote unquote, as you see in the articles, humans. Use the fetal tissue for human development, human advancement, human health. The wickedness to try to blur the lines. Those fetal tissue elements come from an image bearer of God in the womb, and they need equal protection and equal justice, and only Christians who are following the Bible, thus abolitionists, five-tenet abolitionists, are the only people seeking this rightly in this case, at least with a name on them. If you think that you're right on this and you're dead on and you're in agreement to call yourself pro-life, please join the abolitionist cause, because the pro-life cause, the movement, is not in that vein. Join us as abolitionists, that we would do this rightly under the five tenets given great explanation and definition in Scripture. And ask me if you need help with any of that stuff. But know this, friends, that as we continue to walk this path, we continue to let the blood guilt build, as we let even more, tens of millions more die. And I know the specific numbers are in the 60 millions, but you got to add things like IVF, where literally a petri dish is full of babies, who knows how many, and then they check those babies and test them and see which of those it's not even an embryo usually at that part, but I mean, they're babies. They're babies at their earliest form. They find out which one is the most viable, and then the others are frozen and or cast away and thrown away, murdered. Yes, they're very small, but they're still babies and they're murdered. So IVF is probably murdered more than the standard abortion issue. I'm sure we have murdered more than 100 million babies since Roe v. Wade, and they were murdered before that too. Our nation is soaked with the blood of the innocent. We need to repent, and we need to be a voice. So friends, recognize the connections. Recognize that those vaccines that are COVID-19, they are bad, if nothing else. A tyrannical government has come up because we have been a godless nation, because we have a public school system that promotes abortion, promotes sexual perversion, promotes LGBTQ ideology, promotes all the wickedness that's bringing about the murder and death of these preborn image bearers, promotes evolution. Oh, wow. That's a big one. Friends, we should have had our kids out of this public school system a long time ago as Christians. There's no excuse. Get them out. Get them out. Because the supply and demand chain runs and grows by us promoting it through public schools, through using products that we know are directly tied to murdered image bearers of God. Remember, these vaccines would not be here were it not for murdered image bearers. Other vaccines might, but these wouldn't. The ones we're taking, the ones we're getting shot in our arms, the ones we're acquiescing to for our comforts, for our jobs, for our well-beings, people that are taking them are doing so for their well-being. And you have to know, and I hope these articles have helped you see, and others I've shown through several other shows, that by our complicity, being tied to our apathy more than anything, but yes, a great number of professing Christians are those who've gone and murdered their babies at those abortion mills. In fact, the highest percentage is by professing Christians, and that's sick. But be that as it may, even those true Christians that are really out there have been apathetic towards this, we are helping it continue by not being a voice against it, by not putting our foot down, trying to get healthier, trying to get better off, and not take part in this wickedness. By getting out of the big pharma mess, by making sure the stuff you're taking isn't attached to murdered babies. And I did address that. People, if you're being hit up recently, I did an almost hour-long show, plus I did a 7-minute quick one. Either one you want to check out, because a lot of people are pushing the idea of, everything, all these over-the-counter meds, aspirin, Tylenol, even Tums and things like that have all been tested on HEC293 cells, blah, blah, blah. It's apples and oranges nonsense. And I go over it in depth for over an hour, and I do it in 7 minutes or so. You can get that easier here on the Core Issues podcast. Check it out. But my friends, please know that we are helping contribute to this by helping to further this. And let me tell you, friends, sad that Catholics are at least having some voice in this far more than Christians are. And when the Christians speak like disgusting how Jeffress out there is actually promoting it and use that false analogy, and I talk about that in my 7-minute video in the hour. But many Christians are promoting the use of the vaccines, or at least approving them, if you really want them. We're in a sad spot, because it shows that we don't care about the connection, and maybe even worse, that we don't even know about the connection to murdered image bearers, because we're so apathetic. And there's no excuse for that in this day and age, no excuse. So I'm helping you out. I'm giving you the information. I'm pointing this stuff out to you, and I'm showing you where you can go research it yourself and get more details and dig deeper if you wish. But please, friends, remember, the supply and demand, the demand for our betterment, the demand for our comfort, the demand for our well-being, the demand for our freedoms is being fueled by the supply of murdered image bearers of God. So stop demanding it. If we as Christians, if all of us as true Christians, however many millions that would be, surely if all those who name the name of Christ, false converts though that many may be, if we actually all took a stand and said, we are not going to take part in any of these vaccines, we'd have done that already. They would have had to rocket, put another one in the warp speed chamber to get a vaccine ready that was not produced using murdered image bearers' body parts and by the company that isn't tied to that. It would have been necessitative, because many people have refused because of that alone. But then, of course, they'd have to reel back all the tyranny that comes behind that of the forcing it and the mandates and all that fun stuff too, which, of course, they may not have had to be enforcing had they given an ethical out earlier on when it was an option. But, of course, the mandates and the wickedness of that and all of this ties to tyranny, because at the root, we have abandoned God. Woe to that nation who abandons God. What does Scripture tell us? Woe to that nation, all those who forget God or reject God. Sorry, I don't have the verse right on top of my head, but we know it. We're a wicked, apathetic, and godless nation, and we as Christians need to rise up and speak and act for the glory of God and good of others. So I hope that's been a help. I've seen there's a few people watching. Don't see any questions. So I am going to shut this down, and I pray that it blesses everyone today who has watched. And if you have questions, feel free to put comments as you see it in the Facebook group. Again, this is on Facebook. Again, this will be on my personal page. That's where I record it. That's where I stream it live. But then also I will copy it over to the Core Issues page. So if you're following Core Issues, you'll be able to see the episode in there as well. This is episode 17. Again, thank you so much for following along with Core Issues. God bless you, friends. Have a great day. Talking to you soon, hopefully. Bye now.